Story 1. They won't deal with it at all. I expect Trump to say his new tariffs are retroactive and claim that the money is then all legal.
An army of corporate lawyers. It'll be the real test of executive power. Forget Congress or the people. Can it overcome corporations?
Short answer, no. Long answer, fuck no, we won't.
Costco filed exactly when they did, knowing he was going to do this. They're going to file for relief because he's just trying to go around the court opinion. We haven't even seen the executive order yet. Right now, it's just him on Truth Social going, "Dear Diary, the Supreme Court of the United States is a bitch because the stuff he rattled off can't be used."
Story 2. If it's refunded, it'll go to the importers. And the consumers who paid the importers back for them will continue to pay higher prices.
Not for all businesses, though. If your company was the one paying the tariffs and you went out of business because of it, you're not going to be able to reclaim that money. Too big to fail also appears to now be too small to succeed as well.
Worse, they have been buying up the rights to any potential tariff refunds for cheap. It's almost like they knew. I'll offer you $2 million now for the rights to a $20 million tariff refund in the future, if one should be given by the federal government. Since companies have passed the cost to consumers, they jump on this deal, and in the end, we all get scammed into paying twice, more for items and tax dollars to refund billionaires.
So we paid more, inflated more, and indebted more all in one go. Points for efficiency, I guess. I mean, say what you will about this administration, but nobody has been able to fuck the public harder and do it quicker than these people.
Story 3. This was pure extraction. No one is getting a dime. If any of it happens to get sent back, the only traceable costs are to the businesses. Ridiculous. Story 4. Individual refund checks. 100 billion divided by 310 million people is $322 per person, regardless of age. The American people paid these taxes. Or even better, dump it into Social Security to benefit the American people.
Too bad we don't have some universal benefits for all citizens, like universal health care or something. That would be a nice parking spot for all that money that wouldn't immediately benefit the portion of the country that's responsible for fucking the rest of us.
Story 5. Put the illegal perpetrator in prison. If I stole $175 billion from the American people, I would be put in prison forever. Why does Trump get away with it? Story 6. It was paid by U.S. consumers, and we know corporations won't reduce prices. So let's just hand it back to taxpayers with a $500 tariff check. It's peanuts compared to how fucked consumers are by tariffs, but that's what happens when you elect a con man. Welcome to late-stage democracy, where the platform is who can deceive the greatest number of people in very specific locations.
Fed chair. But giving checks to American consumers might overheat our already red-hot economy. The Dow is at 50,000.
Reminds me of a joke I've heard. Chuckles. Two economists are walking in a forest when they come across a pile of shit. The first economist says to the other, "I'll pay you $100 to eat that pile of shit." The second economist takes the $100 and eats the pile of shit. They continue walking until they come across a second pile of shit. The second economist turns to the first and says, "I'll pay you $100 to eat that pile of shit." The first economist takes the $100 and eats the pile of shit. Walking a little more, the first economist looks at the second and says, I gave you $100 to eat shit. Then you gave me back the same $100 to eat shit. I can't help but feel like we both just ate shit for nothing." "That's not true," responded the second economist. "We increased the GDP by $200.
If you create trillions and trillions of debt and make sure none of it flows through the real economy, yeah, the Dow could be 50,000. We could write each other a check for $1 billion and pretend to be rich as long as we don't cash them. It'd be funny, but that's what's literally going on.
Story 7. There's a large business, kind of like a payday loan scheme, that loaned money to small businesses to pay tariffs. They paid those businesses 50 cents on the dollar and took the other side of the trade, allowing them to collect the full refund from the government if the tariffs were overturned. So, I think these companies will get paid because so many people in the administration have ties to these lenders.
Yeah, and one of these businesses is run by the sons of Howard Lutnick. Gotta love the incestuous relationship between government and corporations.
Story 8. They need to refund it all, or deal with a horde of lawsuits, pay lots of lawyers, and then refund it all. Story 9. You could probably afford to provide a free school lunch to every single child in America for the next 5 years, but they won't. Story 10. The major corporations will get refunds and then say it's too hard to kick that back to the end users. Yet another transfer of wealth. Story 11. Split it evenly. Everyone gets an extra about $300 on their taxes this year or next. The importers paid it and passed it on to wholesale buyers, who passed it on to retailers, who passed it on to all of us. Story 12. The cost of tariffs is passed on from the billionaires to the consumers, plus some because of greed. And we paid the taxes on those overpriced goods when we bought them. That money belongs to every taxpayer and should be returned.
I pre-ordered something that's being made in China. There was a separate $19 tariff surcharge and a proviso that it could increase if the orange shit-gibbon threw a financial tantrum. However, since my credit card company has already paid that charge, I sincerely doubt I'm going to get refunded the $19 even though the item is yet to ship.
Story 13. If we wait for Congress to do anything, it'll never get done. They haven't done a day of hard work in decades. Story 14. He said it was trillions collected? Or did he say billions? I can't remember, but he needs to pay back what he said the tariffs collected? Or did he lie about it? Story 15. They will need to issue a refund to anyone who paid tariff invoices. Companies that raised prices to cover the tariffs will get a refund, but they probably won't be able to pass that savings on to customers who have already purchased. And prices won't drop as quickly back to pre-tariff levels due to inflationary constraints that have since arisen. So they will keep it as profit. Not necessarily the morally correct outcome, but the only legal one I can see. Story 16. The waitlist for correcting incorrect tariffs was 18 months long before this ruling, and U.S. Customs and Border Protection has a strict chronological policy. Story 17. Individual refunds to the American people and small businesses. Fuck the large corporations. They got theirs with the COVID PPP loans. Story 18. Admit they were wrong. Use the money to restore USAID, the United States Agency for International Development, or some other agency they gutted like NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, or the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. Take your pick. We can dream, can't we? Story 19. That assumes the Supreme Court is willing to enforce its ruling. Trump violated it almost immediately after. Story 20. Charge him personally and return to those who paid. Good companies could choose to reimburse end purchasers if they want to. Story 21. Treat it like a tax that now needs to be repealed. You cannot realistically return it to Americans who overpaid for things. Story 22. Well, we should start with the release of the full unredacted Epstein files. Then, once we finish with the tar and feather job, we start figuring out either how to get the exact amounts back or taking that money and putting it into something like undoing the damage done to the Department of Education Veterans Care, or assisting those who've been displaced or worse due to the actions caused by immigration and customs enforcement. Just a few thoughts. Story 23. Distribute the tariff money back to the people who paid them, the masses of consumers. Story 24. Return it to the people who paid it. Tariffs aren't government revenue. They're a tax on Americans, and keeping them is just another form of collection without representation. Story 25. We all know it's going into Trump, the oligarchs, and his cronies' pockets somehow. Story 26. Worst case. Nothing. Medium case. Pay back the vendors who have the option of paying back customers, but might be better off hanging on to it given that the problem is still in power. Best case. Make the guy who illegally collected it pay it back from his personal assets until they're exhausted, then go back to the medium case. Story 27. Those who paid them will sue for a refund. Congress will then have to decide where the money comes from, so they will delay or cut the Supreme Court's budget for clerks to get even. Story 28. Considering Trump has floated like 5 different ways he's spending the tariffs that each cost more than he collected, except he hasn't actually done jack shit. Story 29. I don't know, but one thing is for certain. You, the citizen, will not see a dime from it. Story 30. Illegally collected tariffs under an administration where we have illegally implemented a police state, illegally redacted incriminating information in the Epstein files to protect pedophiles, and who was charged with nearly 100 illegal felonies but still not impeached. At what point does the label illegal just become synonymous with old rules under this administration? It's not illegal if the legal system does literally nothing to stop it. It's kind of like the way it's illegal to deface U.S. currency, yet you can get a penny smashed or elongated with an image from the U.S. Mint Center as a souvenir literally at the gift shop of the U.S. Mint. If it isn't enforced at all, then is it really illegal? Story 31. Grab Trump and his family, pick them up by their feet, and shake them until it all falls out. Story 32. The fact that very few people are calling for free healthcare speaks volumes about American culture, to be honest. Story 33. The Supreme Court punted the issue of what to do with the tariffs already collected back to the lower courts to resolve. Trump could be out of office by the time all the dust settles. Story 34. They're 100% going to be refunded. While it may not be the full amount, it's going to be at the very minimum 20 to 30% of the amount. How would you know? U.S. Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick's company, now run by his sons since he became Secretary of Commerce, bought up a whole lot of refund rights from companies impacted by the tariffs at about 20 to 30% of the value, and this happened months ago. The only way they can make money is if refunds happen. Story 35. They have lost more than they've gained, so presumably it would be used to partially pay for whatever government services are currently underfunded. Suppose that through free trade, a bunch of companies formed, bought goods from one another, some imported and some not, and through sales tax and income tax and all taxes related to that trade, the government raised $300 billion. Now suppose that with tariffs introduced, most of that trade disappears and those companies aren't able to exist. Suppose that through all of the trade-related taxes above, the government now raises $100 billion and an additional $100 billion from tariffs. Now they have $100 billion less than they had before. So it's not like they have $100 billion of new money and are wondering what to do with it. Instead, they have less money than they had before, and now regular government services are more underfunded than they were before. Story 36. If the money is ordered to be paid back, it will be given back to the companies that charged us extra due to the tariffs. It won't go back to consumers. And what do you think the companies are going to do with those big tariff refund checks? Yep, executive bonuses. It's going to be yet another corporate wealth redistribution from the Trump administration. Story 37. By impeaching the president and seizing his assets. Instead, he will eventually die of natural causes and suffer no consequences whatsoever. Story 38. Use it to find stimulus checks for the citizens, but that won't happen. It will either be ignored or refunded to companies. Story 39. The damage is done. Corporations aren't suddenly going to lower their prices to reflect the changes. Story 40. No, we won't get our money, but at least someone got to kick him in the nuts in front of the world. Chuckles. Story 41. So, Trump steals $100 billion from the people and it's all good, no consequence. But when a lunch lady gives a hungry kid food, she's getting fired. Imagine a world where people in power were held to a high standard, and those on the front lines with the direct ability to enrich the lives of the needy were encouraged to do so. I guess the Dow wouldn't be at 50,000. Story 42. Should companies outside the United States call Trump's bluff and ask for the tariff money back? Because he always said it was paid not by the United States, but by the country that sold it to the United States. Story 43. Give it to me. I'll return it to the economy via cocaine and hookers. I'm married, so the hookers will be first come, first served by everyone else. I promise you that my economic policy, cocaine and hookers, will be 1,000,000 times more effective than Reagan's trickle-down economics. Those hookers will spend it on poor people stuff like rent for their families and food, rather than Twitter or social media marketing. Story 44. Well, given that the increased costs were passed on to the consumer, it's only right that the money should be given back to the companies for stock buybacks and bonuses. Story 45. Likely it'll never go back. What should they do? With that kind of money, they could house all of the unhoused people in their country. With the leftover $90 billion, they could provide funding to healthcare and education. Saying funding healthcare seems a bit odd, since they could save hundreds of billions by just publicly funding healthcare. Story 46. How do I think? Or what do I know? I think they should set up a website, include some KUC stuff, and allow people to request a refund with a copy of the entry and their receipt. What do I know? They won't do that. They will lie, prevaricate, and evade for months or years, and finally implement a complicated Rube Goldberg process that works for no one. Nutlick's firm will, however, cash in billions. Story 47. Increase the billionaire tax by twice that amount and give checks to everyone. Don't let them use more of our tax money to refund corporations. Story 48. Bonuses for CEOs, big payouts for shareholders, bribes for senators and Trump. Story 49. Democrats need to be campaigning for a tariff refund check for all Americans. Let the Republicans say out loud they don't want that and watch their base lose their collective mind. Chuckles. Story 50. Refund affected importers. If a court determines tariffs were unlawfully collected, issue refunds with interest to importers who paid them. Use an administrative claims process through U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Story 51. The government is not giving refunds. For example, the United States consulates are not giving out refunds for fees people overpaid. Story 52. Most likely outcome. Businesses will get a refund and continue to keep the prices high because of some excuse about the economy and supply chain. In my experience, prices never go back down once they go up. Story 53. Use it to finance a post-presidential investigation to recover all the money that Trump has stolen from the United States government and claw that back from the Trump family. Story 54. If it goes anywhere besides Trump's pockets, it'll go back to corporations, who will then use it to buy back stocks, boosting their share price. The Dow over 60,000. Aren't you sick of winning? Story 55. Should deal? Refunds to taxpayers. In reality, each individual company is going to have to sue the administration individually, and the Supreme Court will eventually tell them all to get stuffed. Meanwhile, increased prices will continue. Story 56. Importers and resellers have already made their money. There needs to be a check to every adult American. I heard that amount would be like $1,600 to $2,000. Story 57. We should start by using Trump's assets. When they are done with that, immigration and customs enforcement assets. If that doesn't cover it, Musk's business and wealth should be nationalized and used. But what they will do is likely ignore it until a court order mandates it, then delay and appeal until it gets put onto the next administration to figure out. Story 58. I personally think stimulus checks should go to every taxpayer. In reality, it's probably already been fucked off to foreign nations. Story 59. Fund healthcare for all. Done. Once people have it, they won't want it taken away. Story 60. It is already in his personal offshore bank account. The only thing that Trump isn't incompetent about is corruption. Story 61. And his response is that he's going to keep everything in place and add an extra 10% globally. Goddamn Trump and fuck MAGA. Story 62. How should they, or how will they? That money is gone, much of it in Trump's pocket. Story 63. Deduct it from his bank account, since that's likely where it all went to begin with. Story 64. They will go through the effort to refund the consumers for the higher prices they paid due to the tariffs. Story 65. In order to secure a stay from the Supreme Court of the United States, so that his tariffs would be collected while the case was decided, Trump promised he would refund the tariffs if he was ruled against. His brief says, a stay pending appeal and an immediate administrative stay are necessary to prevent immediate irreparable harm to the nation. And a stay would not harm plaintiffs, who can be made whole through a refund, including interest, if tariffs paid during these appeals are ultimately held unlawful. Absent at least interim relief from this court, the United States plans to seek emergency relief from the Supreme Court tomorrow to avoid the irreparable national security and economic harms at stake. Plaintiffs oppose this motion. The Supreme Court of the United States should never have granted that stay. Story 66. Fine, Trump. He pays them. He is the one who set them up. Everything points to him. It's time for accountability. Story 67. I think Trump will put it in his own personal bank account. After all, it was his big, beautiful idea and deserves every bit of it. Chuckles. Story 68. Should we clamp down on the orange clown and put the power of tariffs where it legally belongs, with Congress? But what will they do? Not a damn thing. Story 69. Nothing will happen except corporations getting massive payouts. Kind of like it was all supposed to happen. Story 70. Definitely going into somebody's pockets with no hole in it. I don't expect them to do anything, to be honest. Story 71. Give it all to Elon to motivate him to replace all citizens with robots, so that us normal wrong-thinking people won't have to vote ever again. Promises made, promises kept. Chuckles. Story 72. Regardless of downstream impacts and who I think it impacted. In civil court, it will be the importers getting refunded and potentially more for damages. Story 73. I think we should take the money and subsidize vacant childcare, elder care, and hospice facilities. That's where the money would do the most good. Story 74. Individuals and companies petition the courts to be reimbursed for the actual costs they incurred, the amount of the tariff they absorbed, after a reasonable time frame. The remaining amount is pooled together and refunded to citizens. Story 75. Return them to the people of the United States who paid for them in the first place. Story 76. One way or another, it's headed offshore. Maybe it'll get mixed up with the Venezuela or Gaza bailouts. Story 77. The Department of Peace is about to get make that $100 billion slush fund. Story 78. Start the file a claim system. Upload the receipts for tariffs paid to reclaim your money. Story 79. Are we talking about clawing it back from the importers or refunding it somehow? Because I can already see that devolving into a massive headache either way. Story 80. Confident that money has already been moved out of the government into private hands. Guaranteed. Story 81. Force the corporations to reduce prices 20% below where they were before the tariffs were announced. The prices can go back to the same price as they were in February 2027. Story 82. The tariff money will be refunded to the United States companies that paid it. It won't trickle down to the United States consumers who paid higher prices during that time. Plus, the prices still won't come down by too much. Trump's policies always screw the general public, not the rich. Story 83. Honestly, just keep it. The government will get sued, and they'll have to figure it out. I know they're not about to just preemptively give that money back. Story 84. The whole thing will get tied up in court for years. Trump will refuse to recognize the ruling and keep the money. Only when either A, Trump dies in office, or B, another president comes in, will the government refund the money. Oh, what a headache the next administration will inherit from this Trump mess. Story 85. The companies that paid them will sue. They will very likely win as well. The government will either try to make deals with them or, more likely, Trump will call them names and have a hissy fit when they are ordered to pay it all back. Story 86. I would argue that what they're technically supposed to do is return the money. I'd start a price gouging investigation on all those companies and set the fines equivalent to what was collected. Tell the companies they can get their refund only on these conditions. For certain set MSRP goods, manufacturers suggested retail price goods, where those customers are given their money back. Those companies must reduce those set MSRPs back to the original and agree not to raise the price on the product for a period of 2 years. Only after the 2 years will the company get its refund. If the company violates that, the refund is forfeited. Story 87. Freedom checks. Because there's no way the corporations are going to refund us what they charged extra. Story 88. About 100 million Americans paid for those tariffs. So $1,000 checks each would be about right. Story 89. Trump will transfer it all to his various ventures long before the courts get a chance to do anything about it. $10 billion already went to his Board of Peace. Story 90. Why can't we simply vote to have the money returned to the rightful owners? Like, really, why do we just let them keep it? Like, can't we just tell them, Well, we the people don't want that, and we decide? Story 91. Oh, a little bit goes to businesses, a little goes into his buddy's pockets, a little bit into his pocket, and a bit into the Board of Peace. And when asked why everything is going to shit in terms of inflated prices, he'll mention that you may have paid $10 for a dozen eggs at the grocery store, but he paid $20 for a 3-egg omelet 2 years ago. Story 92. I wouldn't be opposed to putting that money toward a child tax credit. We need more kids. Story 93. Trump actually bankrupted a casino. Let that sink in. It's a business where it's legally rigged so the house always wins. Story 94. They're not doing shit. They might have to pay some companies when they sue, but consumers won't see any money back. Story 95. Impeach and sue him for everything he has. Most of his wealth came from profiting off the presidency. Give it back to the American people whom he and his administration should be serving. Story 96. What do you mean, how should they deal with them? That money is already in Trump's offshore accounts. Story 97. Even if they return the money, much of it is going to Lutnick and his kids because of the bet they made on Liberation Day that the tariffs they were helping put in place would eventually be struck down by the courts. Basically, Lutnick and Sons bought the rights to any tariff money that gets returned if the tariffs are struck down for pennies on the dollar. Story 98. I certainly could use a few bucks, but I'm guessing it will just be chalked up to the stupidity of Trump, and I'll just have to eat it. Story 99. Chuckles. Would it surprise anyone if Trump just kept it himself? Or if he'll name the Capitol after himself and put up a statue? Maybe even make January 6th a holiday. Story 100. Maybe we will finally see the promised Doge and tariff checks that the American people were promised. Story 101. How about Donnie and his family pick up the bill? They've been making money hand over fist. You can also throw in some of his cabinet members who've been making money, and some of his donors, Bezos, Zuckerberg, Thiel. They've got enough money. They can afford it. And since they profited off all of this, they can pay up. Emphatic, not the American taxpayer. Story 102. What Republicans think. The money is going to trickle down. So let's see how that works out. Story 103. If I don't have to consider the law, I'd give it all to immigration and customs enforcement. If I had to consider the law, I guess I'd ask a lawyer. Story 104. Over? They'll directly reimburse the companies that sue them, then wait for the class action lawsuit and fight that all the way to the Supreme Court. Then we'll all get an extra break on our tax returns. You can expect to see something in 6 to 7 years. Story 105. By giving it to Americans who work and live paycheck to paycheck, or just give it to Israel. Story 106. They should give it to me. I promise I'll handle it slightly more responsibly than they will. Story 107. Yeah, it's going to take a really long time to get that money back, so we're just not going to do it. God bless America. Story 108. Don't forget all the lost business as the world stops doing business with the USA. Tough to quantify that. Story 109. They won't. Story 110. Chuckles. Haha. Maybe report it and donate to the government. Oh wait, maybe that doesn't count. Story 111. Put Trump in prison and we will work it out. As long as the pedophile criminal is loose, his nose is stuck in everyone's business. A very, very dangerous man. Story 112. They should hand him another $10 billion for his Peace Board Club to do what he wants with it. Story 113. Should we? Maybe shift it into everyone's income tax returns? Will we? Probably just give it back to the corporations, who will sit on it and keep the prices at elevated levels. Story 114. If you use Republican math, you will be able to give every American citizen $1 million. Story 115. Distribute it as checks to everyone except the rich. They will never do that, though, unless somebody actually leaks the rest of what they redacted about Trump in the Epstein files. Story 116. Obviously, businesses ask the Treasury for a refund, and certain parties who bought tariff relief get all the cash at the expense of the taxpayers. Story 117. Don't give it back to the companies. Give it to the consumers who paid higher prices. If you give it to the companies like Walmart, then it's just another massive transfer of wealth to the rich. Story 118. Give it back to the companies that paid it with a stipulation that they all have to drop their prices to consumers by 10%. Story 119. Allow the Internal Revenue Service to divide the money equally among everyone who filed a tax return for the 2024 tax season and mail them a check. Story 120. Fire him immediately for violating his oath of office, since he had no such authority. Then, seize all his assets to help pay back Americans. Make sure to get control of that $10 billion he stole this week and the Venezuelan oil proceeds he stole from whoever owned that oil. Story 121. It was a con. The man who told Trump to do it bought them. Trump's family and friends bought refund rights worth millions of dollars. Story 122. Our money will go back to the corporations who will pocket the... So, Trump gifted $15 billion a month of our money to corporations via illegal taxation. The real question is, was it intentional or just more incompetence? Story 123. Tariffs are paid by the corporations who import the goods, for example, Amazon, Walmart, and Home Depot, and are passed on to the consumer through higher prices. So if anyone gets a refund, it will be the enormous corporations who will definitely not be passing that along. Just like the savings from limiting debit card fees and Trump's first corporate tax break, the big merchants will pocket the windfall and probably still keep prices high.
Not all businesses are huge corporations. I run a small import business, and we've already paid over $250,000 in extra tariffs. We had to take out loans for much of that because when we ordered the products, the tariffs were lower, but by the time they came in, they were jacked up. Without those loans to cover it, we would have had to file for bankruptcy. I don't expect them to return the money, though. This administration is the biggest scam we've ever seen.
Story 124. Trump just declared he is going to impose an additional 10% global tariff under Section 122. So there's that. Story 125. Transfer to the Board of Peace. I am positive they will make good use of it. Chuckles. Story 126. Since we, the people, paid those tariffs to the vendors, the refunds are returned to us, the people. If the vendors sue for recovery, we sue them for recovery. Courts seem to be willing to support the people at this particular moment. Story 127. Possibly, they might try to send a fraction of it back to the taxpayers and pat themselves on the back for it. I suspect they'd do so right as the midterm elections are kicking into gear. Story 128. The government should use it to compensate the Fortune 100 companies and to give monetary aid to the perpetrators mentioned in the Epstein files. Story 129. The Trump family businesses have been looting money. Think Trump Mobile, Trump Watches, the Trump Meme Coin, and Truth Social, etc. Let them pay it back. Story 130. It'll be very optimistic to think the administration will pay back the tariff. It'll be downright insane to think that if it did, the businesses will pay back the customers. Story 131. Put it towards the debt. Use it to help the homeless. Businesses shouldn't get it back, as they won't refund any to their customers. Story 132. So what's interesting and gross here is that many companies sold their rights to tariff refunds. Who did they sell these rights to? Howard Lutnick's sons. They're going to make billions. Story 133. Donate it all to the United States Agency for International Development, not just because it's a good idea, but because it would probably cause him to have a stroke. Story 134. Refunds to the general public who paid the taxes. But our deficit is growing at the fastest pace since 1960 already. And yesterday, GDP growth was the slowest since COVID-19. We're screwed either way, and this was only the first year. Story 135. I'm sure that if Trump and his crew resign, release all the Epstein files, and go to jail, the rest of the world will forget about the debt. Story 136. They should collect it from his businesses that he's not supposed to be running while in office. Story 137. They were paid by Americans, not companies, correct? So no companies should get refunds. Story 138. Burn the entire establishment down and restart from scratch. Made for the people, by the people. Again. Story 139. I think they will give him another $10 billion of taxpayer money to put in his filthy pockets. Story 140. Just take the money, throw it into the black hole of debt we have, and call it quits. Story 141. It will be a mess. It didn't have to be. Of course, if he had just followed the law, this would have been avoided. But after he imposed them, remember, he ordered businesses not to separately state the tariff the customer was paying. So instead of just passing along a percentage tariff, it was hidden and most likely incorporated into the sales price as a cost. And maybe even added to the cost of non-tariff products that were easier to raise prices on. Under this method, a 20% tariff is bumped up to match the company's margin rates. A $20 tariff then turns into a $33 sales price. All because Trump didn't want himself to look bad for this. I have no idea how they will fix this, but I predict that we middle-class workers will be the ones screwed. Story 142. Impacted businesses that want a refund should calculate how much of the added cost of the tariff they passed on to consumers. Any cost that they absorb themselves to stay competitive is reimbursable. For example, if the tariffs added $10 to the cost of a product and they only passed $8 of that on to consumers, then they are eligible for $2 back per item sold. If they passed on the full $10 or more, then they are eligible for nothing on that item. Any company caught falsifying their reimbursement data loses all reimbursement and pays a fine up to the amount of money they were claiming plus $10,000 per falsified application. Egregious misreporting is a criminal offense and carries up to 10 years in jail for the most egregious cases. This applies to whomever signs off on the request and up in the corporate reporting structure. For example, if the chief financial officer signs off, then the chief financial officer, chief executive officer, and board of directors are all jointly criminally liable. All United States residents get money back directly, according to an estimate of the percentage of income spent on consumer goods. More per capita back for low-income than high-income households. I'd probably scale it on household income. $5,000 back for the lowest bracket, scaled down to 0 for the highest 1%. Story 143. Tax credits for middle and working-class people and small businesses. Big corporations and millionaires, 0. Story 144. Big corporations will enjoy a windfall from refunded tariffs, the costs of which were paid by consumers. Stock values will rise. Consumers will get nothing. And don't bet on prices dropping as a way to make it up to us. Story 145. They're going to refund the corporate billionaires. We insignificant taxpayers who've been paying for those tariffs through higher prices will never see a penny, and prices will remain where they are. Story 146. My spouse and I were just talking about this. Who do you pay? So you paid $50 in tariffs on that Temu order. Do they pay you? Chuckles. Story 147. Let's not shortchange the people who paid the tariffs. The refund must be based on Trump's highest dollar quote for what the country brought in, not what they will be claiming now. And check that tariff shelf that he always claimed was overflowing. Story 148. Chuckles. I'm going to start stealing catalytic converters off federal government vehicles to recoup my losses. Story 149. Audit the president and his entire family and associated businesses. Find that money because you know damn good and well it's in their pockets. When accusing a thief, check their pockets. Story 150. Make the Trump organization pay for it. It was illegal. He was not authorized to do that. His immunity protection only protects him for authorized actions. He should be charged. Story 151. Some Wall Street investment companies might get most of the money. Story 152. He'll probably use it to expand his personal political revenge army, immigration and customs enforcement. Story 153. Is it to fund the lawyers that will actually, truly, finally take down the pedophile cabal that's in power everywhere? Every one of them. Everyone that helped. Everyone that covered it up. Everyone. Story 154. I guess each American can get $600. But quite frankly, the best use is for a global good. Something that maybe improves planetary conditions. Story 155. Why don't we, not the businesses, file a lawsuit, American people versus Trump, to try to get the money back? I think some states are doing exactly that. We could probably use this for other things too, such as immigration and customs enforcement lawsuits and so on. Dunno, not a lawyer, but it sounds fun and I'm down. Story 156. That's approximately $330 per American. No one above, say, $250,000 household income annually gets it. That takes it to $350 per American. Story 157. There is plenty of heavily neglected infrastructure that could be fixed. That or small refund checks. Story 158. Start a sovereign wealth fund owned by the citizens that we can cash out at retirement. Story 159. The same thing the guy who stole my wallet is going to do when you yell, "That's illegal," as he runs away. Chuckles. Story 160. Give it back to all the consumers who had to pay those higher prices. And don't give it to the corporations that raised the hell out of prices and made record profits off the consumers. Story 161. I think they should put him in prison for the rest of his life, just like his buddy Epstein. Story 162. Pay it back. Obviously. The idiot who illegally forced it should be writing the checks personally. Story 163. Literally, everyone should sue Trump and anything with his name on it for fraud to recoup all of the stolen funds. Story 164. Didn't they say they can get refunds from the Treasury? Didn't people buy up as much debt as they could, knowing full well this would happen? Prices will not be going back down. The rich will make out like bandits. Businesses will get an economic stimulus as they sold their wares at high prices to cover tariffs. People bought at higher prices knowing about tariffs, but they'll get a refund and will get nothing but more suffering. Story 165. My guess is that if they even try to return the money to the rightful people, it will be as a special tax deduction. They will let companies and individuals figure out what they should get back. They are not going to give it back on their own. Ideally, they would turn it into a stimulus and give it back to the people, but one, that is probably illegal, and two, they do not care that much. At any rate, it is going to be a huge mess and very expensive to fix. Are we great yet? Story 166. That money is long gone. Where do you think all the extra billionaires have come from, and the extra billions that the old billionaires added on? Thank God for the wealthy. Without them, we look like a poor country. Story 167. Pay off student loans and medical debt, rebuild infrastructure, and any money left over goes to funding education, cancer research, further medical support, and figuring out how to improve the quality of our land, air, and water. But that'll never happen. Story 168. I want my $2,000 tariff check, and I want it now. That's the only solution I'm willing to accept. Story 169. Throw a nationwide party and announce that the people they collected the tariffs from are paying. Story 170. Tax refunds. We all get them, including businesses. This isn't complicated. Most of the collectors are businesses anyway. With full records they report to the government. There won't be new tariffs that overstep what the Supreme Court of the United States just confirmed are the limits on what the president can do. The president can't do anything on taxes without Congress voting to approve it. This is all as of today. U.S. Customs was ordered by the Supreme Court to stop collecting any tariffs that were based on executive orders immediately. You better believe they will. There's no more ambiguity or questions. It might take time to get refunds, but the important thing is the tariffs stop today. Unless there's a congressional bill or vote backing the tariff up, it's officially dead. Story 171. At this point, just get the tariffs reversed. Unless there's a huge loss, there's really no point in going after the petty stuff. Story 172. Reality is, unless it can be personally drained from the profits of the people in charge, it's going to benefit a few big corporations who will get some free taxpayer money. The damage to society is already done, and the ones who actually paid the illegal tariffs, that is, the people, won't get a damn thing except higher ongoing prices. Story 173. Charge the president with financial crimes? He stole $100 billion from the people illegally. How is this not theft? Story 174. Seize the money from all the accounts directly paid to Trump and his Epstein friends. Freeze and take all assets of the billionaires who paid for this coup. Offer offshore countries holding their hideaway funds a finder's fee to turn over their assets. Pay restitution to the companies and all people affected by their illegal activities. Story 175. It's going to be a lot more than 100 billion. He is just sucking big bucks from all those U.S. non-voters. Story 176. He should pay for it himself. Maybe set up a GoFundMe to get money from his rich cronies, since they have all the money. Story 177. I think it should be filed for a refund via the Internal Revenue Service. It's a tax. No? I can't see FedEx or the United States Postal Service processing the refunds at all. Story 178. All these business owners need to band together and pressure their congresspeople to punish the one who imposes tariffs. Their pressure would actually get the cucks, formerly known as Republicans, to actually do their jobs. Story 179. The Supreme Court of the United States didn't order any refunds, and any company that raised prices already got theirs. For those companies that didn't raise prices and import their goods, they could possibly sue, but they'll have to explain how they were damaged if their profits went up due to increased market share. And ultimately, they'll have to weigh the cost of suing versus what the actual damages were. It will take years before they see a dime. The most likely course of action is none. Story 180. Give it back to the people, not the corporations that jacked up the prices and had the consumers pay the bill. Story 181. What if Trump and his family members just paid it instead? Since they've made billions from us, it only seems fair. Story 182. I can think of one wing of a prominent historical landmark that needs to be restored to its previous glory, but it may have to wait until after the next presidential election. Story 183. Well, after Trump is executed, we should fire every member of Congress, every senator, and every Supreme Court justice who have taken large corporate campaign donations, free luxury vacations, or interest-free, repayment-free loans. Story 184. Realistically, they'll return it as the Trump non-refundable tax credit to make sure only those paying taxes get it back, while simultaneously claiming they reduced everyone's taxes by giving you back your own money. Story 185. Perhaps they could use it to figure out why the Pentagon keeps failing its audits. Story 186. It'll get pissed away in legal fees anyway. Well, not just legal fees, but also all of the public relations and lobbying. If it gets awarded away from the government, it'll likely go back to the firms which originally cut the checks to the government for the tariff charges in the first place. We shall never, as consumers, see that money. Story 187. We do it the mob way. Shake down the ones who took it, redistribute the stolen funds, or other ways, of course. Story 188. I certainly don't think any refunds should go to Trump voters. They can suck it. Story 189. The right thing would be to give it to the people. The realistic thing will be that the Don uses it however it pleases him. Long live the king. Story 190. I think they will actually wind up losing the thousands of lawsuits against them and will have to pay most of it back to the retailers, plus interest. The money was collected illegally and is owed back. Period. Story 191. If they do anything, I bet they'll refund the people who paid them to the government, and the rest of us will keep paying the inflated prices. Story 192. They can transfer all that to my bank account. I will dispose of them free of any charge. Story 193. It's already been paid for by the American people who voted for Trump. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Story 194. They clearly need to return it to the other countries, because while they might have lied about the tariffs being legal, it's not an issue since the other countries paid for it, not the importers. Story 195. The bigger picture is not the tariff collected. Because of the tariff, many businesses shut down. Hundreds of thousands around the world lost their jobs. The damage inflicted due to the tariff is incalculable. Story 196. To answer the question of what I think should be done with it, divide it equally among every citizen and distribute it. I don't care if we all get 2 cents. That money shouldn't be going to anyone other than the ones who paid the price increase. Story 197. First of all, the money is gone. They spent it, giving $50,000 bonuses to everybody that joined ICE. America is in a very serious debt crisis, pretty much in debt spiral territory. So, they now will have to issue new bonds to borrow more money to pay it back plus interest to refund everybody they fleeced. Importing companies get to double tap. They fleece the customer, get the money back from the government, and maintain higher prices. It's actually crazy how everything is mismanaged all the way up to the top. Wouldn't be surprised if America collapsed overnight due to its debts and the collapse of the US dollar. Story 198. The U.S. government should send everyone a check to compensate them for the money Trump stole from them. The easy way to do that is every adult gets a check for X amount. Will the U.S. government do that? No. I suspect the wealthy will get the gold mine and everyone else will get the shaft. Story 199. The fairest way would be to give every American citizen a juicy bonus with their paycheck, as they are the ones suffering the most under the tariffs. The next step would be for the world to sue Donald Trump personally, not only empty his pockets, but also put him in jail for the last few months or maybe years of his miserable life. Story 200. I think we should make Donald Trump wash the dishes at a small Vietnamese family restaurant to pay it off. Story 201. Simple. American consumers and importers should sue the U.S. government. They paid it. Story 202. If they physically reached into your pockets and started pulling out cash, you would punch them in the face without a second thought. But because some old piece of shit does it another way and illegally, you don't do shit. Explain to me why. Not rhetorical.